This story contains a brutal truth about the choices we make. If you believe second chances are possible, you need to smash that subscribe button right now. Hit like and comment to share your reflections on the moment a billionaire's empire collided with his secret family. The terminal lockdown. The storm outside wasn't just roaring, it was pressing. Snow piled against the windows of O'Hare International Airport in Chicago, muffling the glare of the runway lights until the glass itself looked like frosted stone. The announcements repeated on loop over the loudspeakers, the same two words flashing on every departures board. Delayed. Passengers moaned, cursed, laughed nervously. Children sprawled across carry-on bags. Couples argued in hushed tones. Business travelers stabbed at their phones with frustration. The airport had become a clockless waiting room. Through the sliding doors of Concourse B, a figure entered from the jet bridge. Elias Thorne moved with the quiet stride of someone accustomed to private lounges and polished boardrooms. At 39, CEO of one of America's fastest-growing tech firms, his name carried weight on Wall Street and in Silicon Valley. His tailored coat and noise-canceling headphones separated him from the sea of restless travelers. Yet, pausing at the edge of the crowded seating area, he removed his headphones. For the first time that day, he listened, not to investors, not to analysts, but to the raw clamor of people stranded together by the weather. Elias adjusted the strap of his leather carry-on bag. He could have retreated to the VIP lounge, ordered champagne, and buried himself in emails. But something propelled him forward, an impulse he couldn't name. Then he saw them. A woman in a simple winter coat sat near gate C23. 3 identical children were pressed against her. Their sneakers swung over the floor in unison. Each held a packet of airline pretzels, the kind given out as if they counted as dinner. Elias's breath hitched in his chest. He knew the curve of that woman's shoulders, the way she tucked her hair behind her ear when she thought no one was looking. Audrey. For 7 years, he hadn't spoken her name aloud. 7 years since the papers were signed. Since she had walked out of his life carrying more than he ever realized. Now she looked up. Their eyes met across the terminal. In that instant, the air between them froze harder than the storm outside. And then he saw the children clearly. All 3 pairs of sharp brown eyes, pointed jaws, restless energy. Triplets. Every feature was his, repeated 3 times. Elias gripped the handle of his bag tighter. He had given speeches to presidents, signed multi-billion-dollar deals under blinding cameras. Nothing had ever shaken him like this sight. He took a step forward, his voice barely a whisper. "Audrey?" She rose slowly, interposing herself between him and the children like a shield. Her reply was cold, even, every word chosen like a blade. "You should go back to your VIP lounge, Elias. No one here needs you." The triplets peered over her shoulders with large, fixed eyes. The storm moaned against the glass. Somewhere above, another announcement declared the obvious. All flights delayed until further notice. Elias Thorne, billionaire visionary, master of control, stood rooted to the tiled floor, undone not by a market crash or a hostile takeover, but by the family he never knew was his. 2. The scrutiny of the world. The storm rattled against the glass walls. Inside, the terminal buzzed with restless movement. Suitcases dragged. Children cried. Announcements echoed over and over. All flights remained delayed. Elias didn't move. His eyes remained fixed on Audrey. She shifted her stance, staying firmly between him and the children. The triplets, Finley, Liam, and Asher, clung to her coat. Their gazes darted back and forth, too curious to look away. Elias took a deep breath, steadying his voice. "Audrey, they're mine, aren't they?" "Aren't they?" She raised her chin. "Not here. I deserve an answer." What you deserve, she cut him off, her voice low but sharp, is the truth you chose to ignore 7 years ago. I was in a hospital bed alone, giving birth to 3 children. You were in the sky, chasing another contract. Don't feign surprise now. The words hit harder than any headline or boardroom brawl he had ever faced. Elias swallowed, his throat dry. He looked at the children, their mirrored faces, restless feet, nervous hands clutching snack packs. His chest constricted. Audrey, he tried again, softer this time. Let me at least say hello. She shook her head. You don't get to show up after 7 years and decide you're a father. They are not your press release. They are my children. Her voice caught slightly on that last line, but she held firm. Elias's hand dropped to his side, tightening on his phone. He had built entire companies on timing and strategy. Yet here, every instinct told him he had no control. Then, a flash. A camera phone raised from the far side of the waiting area. Someone zoomed in, snapping a photo of the billionaire CEO standing face to face with a woman and 3 children who looked exactly like him. A murmur swept through the crowd. The photo spread to another screen, then another. Shared, whispered about, tweeted. The words formed like sparks igniting dry grass. CEO Sterling has a secret family? Identical triplets spotted with tech mogul in Chicago. Within minutes, the news had left the terminal, climbing into the internet storm. Elias's phone vibrated violently. He didn't need to look to know who it was. Veronica Royce, his CFO. The woman holding his multi-billion-dollar merger alive. Audrey saw the expression on his face and knew. Her eyes narrowed. And here it comes. The headlines, the gossip, the cameras. Exactly why I never wanted you near them. The triplets fidgeted, sensing the tension, though they didn't understand the words. One tugged at her sleeve. Mommy, can we go home now? Soon, she whispered. Then she looked at Elias, fire in her eyes. You've done enough damage. Don't make it worse. Elias's phone vibrated again, insistent. He ignored it. For once, the contract could wait. He wasn't going to abandon this space. Not when the truth of 7 years stood right in front of him, alive and undeniable. The waiting area grew louder, not with boarding calls, but with whispers. Screens glowed with headlines that had traveled faster than the snowstorm outside. Passengers pointed, some discreet, others bold enough to raise their phones again. Elias ignored the buzzing in his pocket, but the expression on Audrey's face hurt more than any notification. Her jaw was tight, her hand pressed firmly on one of the children's backs, as if shielding him from the world. Congratulations, she said quietly, her voice edged with steel. You just handed them a story that will follow these children for the rest of their lives. Elias's chest tightened. I didn't ask for this. Audrey's eyes flashed. No, but you created it. Every camera in this terminal sees you, not them. To them, they'll never just be children. They'll be your scandal. Before Elias could reply, the speaker crackled overhead. Attention passengers. All flights remain delayed until further notice. Please remain in your designated areas. Groans filled the terminal. The storm outside wasn't moving, and neither was the one inside. The triplets huddled closer to their mother, restless now. One tugged her sleeve. Another whispered, Mommy, why are people looking at us? She knelt down, her voice soft only for them. Because people are bored. Ignore them. But ignoring it was impossible. A man in a business suit approached, holding up his phone. Mr. Thorne, is this your family? His voice was loud, intentional. Others turned to listen. Audrey shot to her feet. We're done here! She snatched up her carry-on handle, ready to pull the children away. Elias instinctively stepped forward. Audrey, wait! She cut him off without turning. Don't follow us. But the crowd did. They didn't care about her warning. They cared about the billionaire who was suddenly not alone. In that moment, Elias's phone lit up again, and this time he answered. Veronica's voice ripped through the line, sharp and urgent. "Elias, what the hell is going on? There are pictures everywhere. Investors are calling. If you don't control this now, our deal is dead." Elias looked around. Dozens of eyes, flashes, whispers. None of this was controllable. Not anymore. He lowered his voice. "Veronica, I'm handling it." "You better," she snapped. "Because right now the market thinks you've been hiding children. That's not just personal, it's corporate suicide." The line cut off. Elias slowly lowered the phone, looking across the terminal. Audrey was sitting again. The children huddled at her sides, her posture rigid but tired. She hadn't run. Not yet. The storm outside rattled the windows again, but Elias knew the real storm was already here, and for the first time in years, the decision he faced wasn't about shareholders or deals. It was about whether to keep walking toward the woman and children who had every right to hate him, or to retreat again into the world that had left him empty. Elias took a step forward. Audience interaction. Do you think Veronica's threat is enough to make Elias choose his corporation over his family? Or is the public exposure forcing him to finally choose Audrey? Comment your prediction. True. The line in the sand. Elias had taken that first step toward Audrey and the children when a sudden burst of light exploded through the terminal. A paparazzo, bolder than the rest, had leaned over a rope barrier, snapping rapid photos of the triplets by her side. "Look this way, just one photo," the man shouted, his camera flashing again. Audrey shot up, her hands extended protectively over her children. "Stop it!" Her voice cracked across the terminal, raw and sharp, but the man ignored her, moving closer. The children squeezed against her, frightened by the noise and the strangers. One buried his face in her coat. The others clutched her arms. Elias moved instinctively. He closed the distance with long strides, interposing himself between the photographer and his family. His voice, controlled but harsh, cut through the chaos. "Delete those photos, now!" The man smirked, lowering the camera only slightly. "Too late, Thorne. The world has seen them, and they'll pay to see more." Gasps rippled through the expectant crowd. Audrey's shoulders trembled with fury. "You see? This is what your world does. It doesn't care who it crushes." Before Elias could respond, security rushed over, escorting the photographer away. But the damage was done. Dozens of other passengers had their phones raised now, some recording, others snapping photos, their whispers rising to a hum that filled the concourse. Audrey pulled the children closer, her face pale but resolute. She whispered, though her words were loud enough for Elias to hear. "This ends the moment we leave. When the storm lifts, we'll be gone. Forever." Elias felt the words like a blow, but in that same instant his phone vibrated again, Veronica's name glowing on the screen. He didn't need to answer to know her message. Control it, or lose everything. He pocketed the phone without a word. His gaze went to the three small faces peering out from behind their mother's arms. Fear, confusion, and something more. Curiosity. For years, Elias had been untouchable, moving from deal to deal, never pausing long enough to see what he had lost. But now, with the storm outside locking them all together, he realized there was no deal big enough to shield him from the truth standing before him. He knelt slightly, enough to look the children over their mother's shoulder. His voice was softer now, but firm. "You don't have to be afraid. No one is going to hurt you, not while I'm here." Audrey stiffened, but she didn't stop him. And though the crowd still buzzed, though Veronica's calls still lit up his phone, though the storm outside showed no line of breaking, Elias knew. Something had changed. For the first time in years, he hadn't chosen the business. He had chosen them. 4. The public confession. The screens above the gate, where flight statuses flashed red, now showed a newsfeed. A headline scrolled across it. The Sterling Secret family? Billionaire CEO seen with 3 identical children at Denver airport. Audrey gasped. She pulled her hood over her face, but it was useless. Dozens of eyes were fixed on her and the children. The children pressed against her, scared by the escalating attention. Elias stood rooted, watching the headline burn on the screen. For years, his empire had seemed untouchable, forged by endless work, watertight deals, and careful control. Now a storm, a photograph, and everything trembled. His phone buzzed again. Veronica. This time he answered. Her voice cut the line, sharp and cold. Elias, you have to leave right now. Don't speak. Don't look at them. Security will escort you and deny everything. He looked at Audrey, who clutched the children tighter, her face pale but fierce. Leave. The word scratched him, echoing the same mistake that broke them years ago. No, Elias said simply. Veronica's voice rose, incredulous. Do you understand what you're throwing away? The Sterling Hyatt merger is worth $2 billion, and you're about to sink it over a photo of 3 kids we don't even know are yours. Elias's reply was steady, though his pulse pounded in his ears. I know enough. They are mine. Silence on the line. Then, Veronica's fury poured out. Then you have chosen chaos. Don't expect me to clean it up. The call ended abruptly. Audrey turned to him. Her eyes were burning. What did she say? That I should leave. And? He held her gaze. I didn't. For the first time, Audrey faltered. Her lips parted, but no words came out. The children looked between them, sensing something unspoken but important. An announcement broke the silence. All departures remain indefinitely delayed. The storm outside roared louder, rattling the glass. Audrey exhaled sharply, her voice brittle but controlled. Then you better learn fast, Elias, because if you're going to stay in this mess, you can't hide behind your company anymore. These are children, not shareholders. The children tugged at her sleeve, hungry and restless. With the food court nearly empty, Audrey hesitated. Then she shoved a bag of snacks into Elias's hands. Prove it, she said dryly. Start with something as simple as feeding your children. Elias froze for an instant, the words sinking deeper than she knew. He looked down at the 3 pairs of identical eyes staring up at him. Not employees, not partners, not numbers on a deal sheet. Children. He knelt, opening the bag, offering the pretzels carefully. The youngest, Finley, reached first, then the others, their small hands brushing his. It wasn't much, just a snack in a storm. But it was a beginning. V. The battle for a safe space. From the crowd, a man in a heavy coat pushed through, microphone in hand, a cameraman right behind him. His voice rang out, sharp, audible to the stranded passengers. Mr. Thorne, is it true you abandoned this family? Did you even know these children existed? Gasps swept the concourse. Phones went up, recording. The children shrank against Audrey's legs, their small bodies trembling. Elias's jaw clenched. He had faced hostile investors, court battles, regulators. Nothing compared to this. 3 children looking to him for safety while the world demanded answers. He didn't retreat. Instead, he stepped in front of Audrey and the children, squaring his shoulders against the cameras. His voice was firm, deliberate. I will answer, Elias said, his eyes fixed on the reporter. But not here, not with my children, in the middle of this chaos. The words slipped out before he could stop himself. My children. Audrey stiffened. The triplets' eyes widened, as if hearing something impossible. The reporter pressed closer, relentless. So you admit they're yours? Elias didn't flinch. I admit they deserve better than this circus. He motioned sharply to security. Clear a room. Now. The damage was spreading online. Tweets, live streams, headlines forming in real time. Audrey's breathing quickened. Fury still burned in her eyes, but underneath it was something else. Conflict. Confusion. The slightest crack in the wall she had built for 7 years. The security cleared a small room, but the reporters still pressed in. Elias stood before the crowd, his travel-worn suit a symbol of his 2 lives. He didn't wait for Veronica's next call. He looked at the reporters. His chest rose. Then, he steadied himself. 7 years ago, Elias began. I made choices that cost me more than I understood. I missed the birth of my children because I thought a contract mattered more. A wave of murmurs swept the room. Audrey's lips parted slightly, surprised by the direct confession. Elias continued, his voice firm but raw. I didn't know they were here today. I didn't even know they were mine. But now I do, and I won't pretend otherwise. A reporter quickly shot back. So what are you saying, Mr. Thorne? Are you abandoning your company for them? Elias looked over his shoulder. The 3 children huddled together, their faces pale with fear and fatigue. Then his eyes met Audrey's. For the first time, she didn't look like an adversary. She looked like someone silently asking if he would truly stay where he had never been before. His answer was simple, but it hit like a hammer. I am saying I am their father, before I am anyone's CEO. The flashes erupted. Some gasps turned to applause from the stranded passengers. Behind him, Audrey's arms loosened slightly around the children. For years, she had only seen Elias choose contracts. Now, in the middle of a snow-covered terminal, he had chosen something else. 6. The final thrust and the run. Elias's phone vibrated again. A new notification lit up the screen, headline after headline. Only this time, the angle had changed. Sterling's ex hid kids for 7 years. Demanding money? Was airport scene staged? Audrey froze as a reporter shoved a tablet close to her face. The article was cruel. It claimed she had deliberately concealed the children, that she was now exploiting them for financial gain. Her chest constricted. She spun instinctively to shield the children as cameras snapped in her direction. Mr. Thorne? Another reporter pressed. Is it true the mother hid your children all these years? Did she keep them from you to force a payout? The children winced at the harsh tone. One clutched Audrey's sleeve. She leaned down, whispering, Don't listen, my love. Stay close. Elias stepped forward, raising his hand. His voice cut cleanly through the chaos. Enough. None of you were there. None of you know what it cost her to raise them alone. The room fell silent, stunned by the sudden defense. The cameras captured every syllable. Audrey's head snapped toward him. For years, she had braced herself for him to dismiss her, to paint her as bitter or demanding. Instead, in front of strangers, he drew the fire onto himself. Elias didn't waver. If anyone failed here, it was me. I wasn't there when I should have been. But don't twist this to blame her. She carried what I left behind, and these children deserve better than your headlines. The silence broke under the weight of those words. The strategy of his CFO, Veronica, had been clear. Destroy Audrey's credibility to save the company. But Elias had just broken the script, returning the focus to himself. The storm outside refused to break. The airport felt like a city trapped under glass. The children had fallen half asleep in plastic chairs, their small heads resting on Audrey's lap. Audrey caught his gaze and said dryly, You can still leave. Pretend none of this happened. Her words hurt, but Elias leaned forward. And leave you to carry this alone? Not this time. Before she could respond, an announcement crackled over the speakers. Attention! Limited boarding will resume shortly at Gate 14. The concourse erupted. Passengers scrambled for bags, dragging children and luggage toward the gate. The sudden surge woke the children. "We're going," Audrey said, determination in her face. She pulled the handle of her suitcase with one hand and clutched her children's hands with the other. "Before this gets any worse." Elias stood, his voice low but urgent. "Audrey, no. Let's go together, please." But she shook her head. "You had your chance years ago. Tonight proved one thing. The closer we are to you, the more the world tears us apart." Her words cut deeper than Veronica's threats. He opened his mouth, but no reply came out. The family moved with the crowd toward security. Then it stopped being normal. Finley's small hand slipped from Audrey's grip. In the crushing of bodies, he stumbled backward, then sideways, swallowed by the stream of rushing passengers. His small figure disappeared behind rolling suitcases and hurried legs. "Finley," Audrey's voice cracked. She spun her head left and right, her heart racing as she pulled the other two children closer. "Finley?" The names cut the air, urgent and raw. Passengers turned, murmuring, "Careless mother. Those kids shouldn't be here." The words burned her ears, shame mixing with panic. She fought her way through, scanning the aisle, her breath short. Elias's instincts took over. He dropped his carry-on bag, pushing against the tide of people. "Finley!" His voice was louder, commanding, reaching across the terminal. Somewhere beyond the crowd, a small sob answered. The faint sound of a child, lost and scared. Audrey's chest tightened. Tears sprang despite her will. She had held everything together for years, but in that moment, she felt it slipping away. The judgment, the cameras, the storm, all faded, replaced by the one thought ringing in her mind. Find my son. And Elias, running, searching, fighting strangers, was the one charging into the chaos. The climax was about to begin. 7. The father's choice. Elias's voice boomed above the chaos, deeper than the murmur, sharper than the rolling announcements. He pushed against the stream of passengers, scanning every corner. Finley's faint sobs echoed weakly, swallowed by the drag of suitcase wheels and hurried footsteps. The boy had slipped past the rope barrier, lost in the current of strangers heading for security. For a man who had once commanded boardrooms in multi-billion-dollar negotiations, seeing him now, shoulders hunched, hair damp with sweat, desperately weaving through the crowd, was something no camera could manipulate. This was not strategy. This was a father looking for his son. A flash of movement, a small figure huddled near a vending machine, knees hugged tightly. Finley's toy plane lay forgotten on the floor beside him. His face was tear-streaked. Elias dropped to his knees, breathless. "Finley," his voice softened. "It's me. It's Daddy." The boy's eyes widened, trembling. "You'll leave again, like before. Mommy said you weren't there." The word hit Elias harder than any headline. He swallowed, forcing air into his lungs. "You're right. I wasn't there when you came into this world. I should have been. But I am here now, and I will not leave you again. Never." He reached out, palms open, steady despite the storm raging inside him. Finley hesitated, tears pooling. Then, with a choked sob, the boy lunged forward, burying his face in Elias's chest. Elias wrapped him in his arms, holding him tight, as if anchoring them both. For a fleeting second, the noise of the airport vanished. It was just a father and his son, finding each other in the chaos. Audrey fought her way through the last part of the crowd, breathless, the twins tugging at her hands. When she saw Finley clinging to Elias, something shattered inside her. Her lips trembled, but no words came out. Elias stood up, lifting Finley against his shoulder. His voice was firm but tender. "We're going together. All of us." The concourse fell silent. Passengers who had murmured careless mother moments before now watched in quiet, some with softened eyes. The cameras clicked, but for once the lens wasn't capturing scandal. It was recording redemption. Audrey's eyes met Elias's across the small space between them. For years, she had only seen ambition in his gaze. Tonight, she saw something else. A father who chose his child over the world. And for the first time, she did not look away. J'ai tu. The quiet choice and the rebuilt home hours. Later, the storm began to abate. Flights were rescheduled and lines advanced. But when their turn came, Elias placed a hand on Audrey's arm before she could hand over the tickets. "Come with me," he said. Not as passengers heading separate ways, but as a family. Audrey hesitated, the boarding gate gleaming behind her like an escape route. But then Finley tugged at her sleeve. "Mommy, I want to stay with Daddy." The twins nodded, their voices soft but firm. "Me too." Audrey's throat closed. She closed her eyes for a moment, then lowered the tickets. When she opened them again, she found Elias watching her, waiting, not with pressure, but with hope. She nodded slightly, and just like that, the plane took off without them. Weeks later, spring sunlight poured over a backyard, melting the memory of the snow. The triplets ran barefoot across the grass, their laughter echoing like music. A kite dipped and soared above them, briefly snagging before climbing again. Audrey leaned against the porch railing, her hair brushed back by the breeze. She no longer carried the same exhaustion in her eyes. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to watch her children play, without the constant weight of being both mother and father. Elias walked out with 2 mugs of coffee. He set one by her hand, the other warming his own. His tie was loose, sleeves rolled up. A man who had finally learned there was more to life than board wings. "They've been like this since morning?" Audrey said, a slight smile pulling at her lips. "Let them," Elias replied. "This is the sound I've been missing my whole life." She turned to study him, still tired, but softened. "And when the next big deal calls?" He held her gaze. "C'est Then I'll tell them my family is non-negotiable." The silence lingered, not heavy, but tender. Slowly, Elias reached for her hand. For a heartbeat, Audrey considered pulling away as she had countless times before. But this time, she didn't. Their fingers intertwined, a quiet promise stronger than any headline. The triplets laughed, filling the air like an answer. The camera of the world had once captured them under the harsh light of scandal. Now, if anyone looked, they would only see what was always missing. A home rebuilt, piece by piece. The greatest measure of success is not where we land, but who is waiting for us when we arrive. Thank you for staying with us until the end of this story, if it touched your heart. Don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel. Every day we bring you more powerful cinematic stories of love, courage, and redemption. Stay tuned. Life after the empire, the true test of redemption. 9. The CEO meets domestic chaos. The first few months of Elias's new life were a study in contrast. He had successfully dismantled his corporate holdings, trading in his power suits for soft sweaters and his private jet for the family minivan. The peace was real, but it wasn't quiet. It was filled with the beautiful, non-negotiable chaos of 3 7-year-olds. Elias quickly learned that managing the logistics of Finley, Liam, and Asher, all with different homework, different snack preferences, and synchronized tantrums, was more complex than any global merger. He didn't just step in, he plunged into the deep end. He became the early morning breakfast cook, the after-school tutor, and the chief engineer of endless bedtime delays. His greatest business skill, problem-solving, was constantly tested by crises like a burst pipe in the basement or the dreaded synchronized stomach flu. One brutal Tuesday night, the The storm inside the house was worse than any snowstorm. Finley started with a high fever, followed by Liam, and then Asher. The small house was instantly overwhelmed by sick day demands, sticky thermometers, and 3 boys needing to be held at the exact same moment. Audrey, who had handled these crises alone for years, was exhausted, but instinctively took the lead. She worked tirelessly, moving from one bed to the next. Elias, despite his best intentions, felt the old panic rising. He was a man who handled systems, not sickness. His impulse was to throw money at the problem, call a private nurse, charter a clean jet to the best children's hospital. Audrey caught his eye as he frantically tried to organize the used washcloths. "Stop trying to manage the chaos, Elias," she said softly, but firmly, her own fatigue showing. "Just be the anchor in it." He finally understood. This was not a problem to be solved. It was a reality to be lived through. He didn't need a strategy. He needed to show up. He put down the phone, picked up the quietest boy, Asher, and simply held him, rocking him gently against his chest. For 2 hours, he stood there, letting the chaos swirl, his shirt getting sticky, his back aching, until Asher finally fell into a calm, deep sleep. He didn't fix the flu. He didn't cure the fever. But he was there, absorbing the mess without complaint or escape. When Audrey finally sank into a chair, overwhelmed, Elias was there to gently hand her a clean blanket and a cup of lukewarm tea. She looked at him, not with gratitude, but with the quiet acknowledgement of a partner who had passed the test of mundane endurance. This was the true redemption, the consistent willingness to be present in the unglamorous, messy reality of their lives. Audience interaction. Which moment do you think is a bigger test of commitment? A CEO leaving a multi-billion-dollar deal, or a father staying up all night with a sick child? Comment your thoughts below. X. The final whisper of the past. Just as the flu subsided and life returned to its steady rhythm, the universe sent one final tempting offer. Veronica Royce, his former CFO, now CEO, called. She wasn't asking for him to return. Instead, she offered him an unprecedented consulting deal. $50 million for 6 weeks of remote strategy work. No travel, no public commitment, purely intellectual. "It's easy money, Elias," Veronica's voice purred over the phone. "It's a legacy project. It's what you were born to do. It's your chance to prove you haven't gone soft." Elias listened, the numbers flashing in his mind. Enough wealth to guarantee the triplets' future, the foundation's stability, and total financial freedom for Audrey. The old, familiar hum of intellectual challenge began to vibrate in his chest. The timing, however, was terrible. The next Saturday was the triplets' first major father-daughter dance at their elementary school, a big, highly anticipated event for Penelope, who was the most thoughtful and sensitive of the 3. Elias had promised to help her choose the music and practice a few simple steps. He knew he could manage both. He could take the job, work all night Friday, and show up Saturday afternoon, tired, but rich. No one would ever know. That evening, as Elias was about to accept the offer, he found Penelope sitting alone on the porch swing. She wasn't sad, just deeply focused, running her small hand over a slightly faded dress. "Daddy," she said quietly, looking up. "The girls at school said their dads have really important jobs, so they might be late. But you won't be late, right? You promised we'd practice." She wasn't asking about money or contracts. She was asking for certainty. She was asking for the one thing the former Elias Thorne could never deliver: consistency. Elias looked at her. $50 million. 6 weeks. A lifetime of quiet trust. He walked back inside, picked up his phone, and dialed Veronica. "Veronica, His voice was calm and steady. "I'm declining the offer. I have a prior commitment that is non-negotiable." "A prior commitment? To what? A yacht? A golf game?" she scoffed. "To a 7-year-old girl who needs me to practice the waltz," Elias said, without a trace of apology. "My legacy is here now. Good luck with the deal." He hung up, the silence after the call feeling richer than any corporate victory. 11. The new family pledge and the future. The next day, Elias spent 4 hours practicing simple dance steps with Penelope and her 2 sisters in the living room, their laughter echoing off the walls. He didn't feel foolish. He felt found. Audrey watched from the doorway, leaning against the frame, a soft, warm smile on her face. This was not the man who wrote the message, "I wanted a woman, not a mother." This was the man who had fought his way back, not with money, but with time. The father-daughter dance was a success. Elias, slightly awkward but beaming, was fully present, his attention solely on the girls. Weeks later, on a quiet Sunday morning, Elias was helping the girls build a complex birdhouse in the yard. He saw Audrey watching him, a profound clarity in her eyes. "You're not going anywhere, are you?" she asked softly. Elias drove a nail into the wood with a deliberate, steady rhythm. "I am home, Audrey, permanently." He stood up, wiping sawdust from his hands. He reached into his pocket. It wasn't the large, ostentatious ring box he would have chosen 7 years ago. It was a simple, small velvet case. "The promise I made at the airport was a choice of fear over failure. The promise I made last month was a choice of presence over power," he said, taking her hand. "But this promise, this is a choice of forever." He knelt, not asking for forgiveness, but asking for a future. "Audrey Sinclair, you taught me that the only true wealth is the love you hold in your hands. Will you let me keep building this home with you? Will you marry me?" Audrey didn't hesitate. She didn't cry. She simply reached out, pulling him to his feet and kissing him. A kiss full of years of survival, pain, and ultimate redemption. They didn't have a grand wedding. They were married quietly on the porch overlooking the ocean, with Finley, Liam, and Asher serving as the proud, if slightly rowdy, ring-bearers. Elias Thorne's life became the ultimate proof that the true cost of an empire is the life you sacrifice to build it, and that the only legacy that truly matters is the constancy of love. The CEO had found his greatest purpose, not in a corner office, but in the center of his family's chaos. Final thought. True redemption is not a single act of apology, but a million small acts of consistent presence. When tested by the ghost of the past, Elias chose the unglamorous, but infinitely more rewarding life of a father. Thank you for reading the full journey of Elias and Audrey. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe to our channel, like this video, and share your favorite moment of Elias's redemption in the comments. The CEO's reckoning. 2 sons. 1. Inescapable truth. Attention. Fans of forbidden love. If you believe that money can't buy happiness or silence the past, you must hit subscribe and smash the like button now. The consequences of this billionaire's betrayal are about to unfold. Dorian St. Clair, a man whose face was synonymous with global success, was about to have his impeccably crafted world shattered by 2 small, identical boys. 5 years ago, under the brutal pressure of his aristocratic London family, the tech magnate had coldly abandoned his wife, Clara Vance, a woman who represented everything genuine and messy he craved. Now, on a crowded stage in Dublin, she reappeared. Not alone, but with 2 5-year-old twins whose piercing sapphire blue eyes and the confident slant of their gold blonde hair were an undeniable miniature reflection of his own. The world saw him as untouchable, but facing Clara and his twin sons, Dorian was forced to confront a truth more devastating than any corporate loss. The price of his ambition was his paternity. Dorian St. Clair. The Perfect Product. Part 1. At 32, Dorian St. Clair was the CEO of St. Clair Industries, a multi-billion-pound empire built on green energy and revolutionary AI. His profile graced Forbes covers, he delivered keynote addresses at Davos, and he moved through the world with the polished sheen of inherited and earned wealth. His image was always the same: perfectly tailored Savile Row suits, golden blonde hair swept back, and sharp, icy blue eyes that signaled cold, disciplined ambition. He lived in a minimalist penthouse overlooking the Thames, drove a custom electric Aston Martin, and for all outward appearances, was destined for untouchable greatness. Yet 5 years earlier, Dorian had almost jeopardized it all for one thing his family deemed irrelevant: love. His secret was Clara Vance. She wasn't an heiress or a venture capitalist. She was a graduate student from Dublin, studying sustainable architecture on scholarships and part-time jobs, with paint often staining her trousers and notebooks full of chaotic, inspired sketches. She had long chestnut hair, expressive eyes, and a way of looking at Dorian that made him feel like he was more than just his title. With her, he laughed louder, slept better, and imagined a future that didn't revolve around quarterly earnings. He pictured a simple life, a small wedding, a cozy home, and children with those same expressive blue eyes. They met at a gala he attended only out of obligation. She was setting up stage lighting, and he literally stumbled over her while checking his stock updates. It was the most human moment he'd had in months. Their relationship blossomed in private. Takeaways on her tiny balcony, late-night talks about dreams, and long, anonymous walks through London's parks. She mocked his expensive watch and fiercely refused to let him pay her rent. But the St. Clair dynasty had other plans. When his parents, the formidable Lord Julian St. Clair, chairman of the board and Dorian's coldest confidant, and Lady Helena St. Clair, learned of Clara, their reaction was immediate and brutal. "She is not of your caliber. She dilutes your brand," Lord Julian stated plainly in his mahogany-paneled office. "Marry her, and we begin the process of removing you from succession." Lady Helena didn't hide her disdain. "Do you truly wish to shame the family? What will the stakeholders think when they see you with someone so ordinary?" Dorian tried to fight. He argued that he didn't care about perception. But St. Clair Industries was more than a company. It was a 3-generation legacy. His name was the brand. His face was the investment. As the pressure mounted, from his family, the board, the advisors, Dorian felt the walls close in. The worst part: he never told Clara the truth. One day, he simply ended it. No explanation, no argument. He said he needed to focus on his career and walked out of her small flat, leaving behind the woman he had pictured forever. Clara called once, then twice, then stopped. He never answered. He submerged himself in work, convincing himself it was necessary. But not a day passed without him thinking of her, missing her laugh, and feeling the deep, agonizing regret. Clara Vance, building cradles, not empires. Clara never believed in fairy tales, but falling in love with Dorian St. Clair felt perilously close to one. Then, one day, he was simply gone. A cold, carefully worded message about needing space to focus on his future. She waited, called, left a long, desperate voicemail, but the silence was definitive. She plunged into her architectural studies, trying to drown her heartbreak in blueprints and deadlines. But weeks later, she noticed the changes, the fatigue, the nausea, the delay. It was stress, she told herself. But when the test showed the word positive, her breath seized. The doctor confirmed her pregnancy, but the ultrasound revealed something she hadn't expected. 2 heartbeats. Twins. 2 vibrant lives growing inside her. 2 reminders of the man who had walked away without looking back. She considered calling him again, but remembered the silence. The cold response from his assistant. The realization hit her. He was not coming back. Clara decided to leave London. She found a job in a smaller firm in Dublin, a place where no one asked about her past. She rented a modest apartment and lived carefully. The twin pregnancy was brutal, but she was tougher. She worked through swollen feet, sleepless nights, and the crushing fear of being utterly alone. She gave birth to 2 healthy, beautiful boys, Caleb and Finn. They had the same startling gold blonde hair and the most intensely blue eyes she had ever seen. They were 2 small, perfect versions of the man she had loved. At first, it broke her heart to see him in their faces. But over time, that feeling softened into something fiercer. Love. Not for what could have been, but for what was. Her sons were everything. They were loud, messy, wild, and perfect. They were the reason she got out of bed when her body ached and her bank account hit 0. Clara never spoke Dorian's name. When the boys asked why they didn't have a daddy, she told them gently that sometimes people leave because they are afraid of love, and that it wasn't her or their fault. She focused all her energy on raising 2 curious and brave little boys who had no idea they carried a lineage that once governed a city. The inevitable collision. The forum. The invitation arrived unexpectedly. Architectural Futures Forum. Speaker selection. It was real. They wanted her to present her low-cost, sustainable women's shelter design on a major panel in Dublin. It was the recognition she had dreamed of. She hesitated for a moment. The cost of travel, the disruption. But then she said yes. She wouldn't let being a single mother stop her from professional advancement. She arrived in Dublin with Caleb and Finn in tow, 2 energetic 5-year-olds who chattered non-stop. She dressed them neatly in collared shirts and packed a bag full of crayons and snacks. She had no childcare. They would sit quietly near the back while she presented. The event was held in a sleek city skyscraper with glass walls overlooking the docks. She tried not to think about the possibility of running into anyone from her past. London was far away. He wouldn't be here. Why would he? Then she heard his voice. She was mid-sentence, answering a reporter's question, when the low, confident, and agonizingly familiar sound cut through the air. She froze. Her stomach twisted before her eyes confirmed it. Dorian St. Clair was less than 20 feet away, laughing softly with a group of sponsors in impeccable suits. He hadn't changed, only hardened at the edges. His relaxed expression was calm until his gaze landed on her. Clara watched the moment it hit him. First, confusion. Then, shock. Then, something deeper. His eyes flicked past her, towards the two small boys sitting quietly coloring on the carpet behind her table. Time slowed. Dorian's face went white. His gaze locked onto the twins, and Clara could see the gears turning in his mind, fast, desperate, undeniable. She didn't move. She didn't smile. She didn't look away. He walked towards her. She stiffened, clutching the edge of the display table. Everyone around them seemed to fade into background noise. The city, the forum, the years. Everything collapsed into this impossible moment. He stopped in front of her, his voice a barely audible rasp. "Clara." She didn't answer. He looked back at the boys, then back at her, visibly shaken. "Are they them?" She held his gaze. "Yes," she said, calm and level. "They're yours." He stumbled back, reeling. For a moment, he looked like a man who had just taken a punch to the gut. "I didn't know," he said. "I had no idea." "I know," she replied, her voice firm. "I tried, but you made sure I couldn't reach you." Dorian blinked, struggling to process. "But why didn't you try again?" Clara gave a soft, bitter, tired laugh. "I did. I left messages, sent letters. Your assistant told me never to call again. I assumed you had made your choice." Dorian lowered his gaze, the weight of comprehension settling heavily on his face. He looked back at the boys, who still didn't know who he was. Caleb looked up, smiled, and waved innocently. "I need to talk to you," Dorian said, his voice barely breaking. Clara crossed her arms. "Now you want to talk? After 5 years, at a public event?" He nodded slowly. "Yes, I need to explain, and I need to understand." She stared at him, the pain she had buried deep surging to the surface, but she didn't let him see it. "Not here. Not yet. You don't just walk back in like nothing happened," she said. "But if you truly want to understand, start by learning their names." Dorian looked at her, and something fractured in his eyes. He turned to the boys, knelt down, and asked gently, "What are your names?" The twins looked at him, perplexed but curious. "I'm Caleb," one said. "I'm Finn," the other added. "What's your name?" Dorian smiled sadly. "I'm Dorian." They didn't recognize him. Why would they? Clara watched from behind the table, her heart pounding. This was not the moment she had prepared for. Yet here they were, not as strangers, not yet as a family. But something had started to change. The truth was finally out, and nothing would ever be the same. Interaction point. If you were Clara, what would be the single most difficult question you would ask Dorian about his choice to abandon you? Share your first reaction to Dorian's decision in the comments. The DNA test and the first steps. Part 2. Dorian didn't sleep that night. The image of the two boys, Caleb and Finn, persisted in his mind, haunting and vivid. Their names echoed like a mantra he never knew he needed. He could still see their eyes, so familiar it ached, and the way they had looked at him without recognition. They didn't know him. That realization shattered him. The next morning, he arranged a private DNA test. He told no one. It wasn't about legality. It was about getting permission to believe the truth, even though every part of him already knew. The results arrived 3 days later, 99.9% match. There was no denying it. He was their father. Dorian stared at the document for a long time. Then he folded it carefully and placed it in a drawer, like a sacred heavy relic. A door he had unwittingly locked himself out of 5 years ago. He contacted Clara through the event coordinator. She agreed to meet him, once, at a small, anonymous cafe near the Dublin docks. No lawyers, no assistants, just them. She arrived with her usual quiet strength, simply dressed, her hair pulled back. She looked tired, but serene, and more beautiful than he remembered. Life had carved new lines onto her face, adding a gravity that hadn't been there before. They sat opposite each other, two people with years of pain between them, forever connected by two children who didn't know it. "I got the results," Dorian said finally. "They're mine." Clara nodded. "I know." He ran a hand through his hair, struggling to find words that meant enough. "I don't know what to say." "Then don't say anything you don't mean," she said, her eyes clear. "I mean it now, Clara. I didn't know. I swear, I didn't know about them." "I believe you," she said. "But that doesn't erase what happened." Dorian looked down, shame washing over him. "I wanted to fight for you. I was going to. But my parents, the board, it all came down on me. I didn't know how to be the man they expected, and the man you needed." "You chose them," she said. Without malice. "You walked away." "Yes, and I had to raise them without you," she continued. "While you were building empires, I was building cots. While you were giving speeches, I was trying to scrape together enough for dinner." Dorian winced. Her words were not cruel, just true, and they hit harder than he could have anticipated. "I'm not asking for forgiveness yet," he said. "I just want a chance to know them, to be a part of their lives, however small. They're 5 years old. They don't understand betrayal or loyalty, but they understand presence," Clara said slowly. "You can't just drift in and out. You can't start and stop. If you want to be in their lives, it has to be until the end." "I'm in," he said. Without hesitation, whatever the cost. She nodded, still cautious, but something in her posture softened. "Then you start small. Pick them up from school one day. Come to the park. Sit with them. Let them approach you. If they ask questions, answer honestly. If they run away, don't chase them. Just be there." Dorian nodded, humbled. "Okay, I can do that." Leaving the cafe, they parted without embraces or promises, only a fragile understanding. Clara walked ahead, and Dorian followed at a respectful distance. Not as a couple, not yet as a father, but as a man finally trying to correct what had once gone so terribly wrong. The Cost of Presence. Part 3. Dorian's first visit to the boys' school was nothing like the corporate events he was used to. He stood awkwardly by the school gate, dressed in a casual cashmere sweater and jeans, unsure where to put his hands. He'd signed off on billion-pound acquisitions without a sweat, but waiting to collect his sons who didn't even know they were his, made him feel like a nervous teenager. Clara had carefully set the stage. She told the boys that a friend would pick them up and take them to the park. No labels, just a chance to meet on neutral ground. When Caleb and Finn burst out of the school doors, Dorian recognized them instantly. Their blonde hair gleamed in the sunlight, and their identical blue eyes lit up when they saw him, though they didn't quite grasp who he was. He knelt down, unsure of the script. "Hi, I'm Dorian. Your mom asked me to take you to the park today. Is that okay?" The boys looked at each other, then back at him. Caleb tilted his head. "Are you the man from the tall building with all the suits?" Dorian smiled. Yes, that was me." Finn squinted. "Do you have snacks?" Dorian laughed. "Yes, loads." That was enough. They took his hands without hesitation, chattering about dinosaurs and spaceships. Dorian listened to everything, mostly just absorbing them. Their voices, their joy. It was overwhelming in the best possible way. At the park, they ran for the swings, and Dorian sat on a nearby bench, watching. For a few minutes, he allowed himself to pretend that this had always been his life. But that illusion cracked when Finn fell off the slide and bumped his elbow. Finn froze, eyes wide and glassy, trying to decide if the pain was worth the tears. Dorian ran instinctively, kneeling to gently check the small arm. "You're okay," he said softly. "No blood, just a little bump." Finn blinked. "You sound like Mum." Dorian paused, then said quietly, I'm trying to be good at this." Finn leaned into him for just a second, and that small gesture nearly broke Dorian in two. He looked up and saw Caleb standing nearby, watching him intently. There was something calculating in Caleb's gaze, not suspicion, but a quiet assessment. Caleb finally walked closer. "Are you coming back?" Dorian looked him in the eye, his voice firm. "Yes, I'm coming back." Caleb nodded once, satisfied. He then ran off, calling Finn to chase him. Dorian stayed there for a moment, catching his breath. That single question, "Are you coming back?" had felt heavier than any contract he'd ever signed. But his answer had been true. He would be back, again and again. The visits continued, quiet and consistent. Dorian showed up at school pickups, at the park, at classmate birthday parties he didn't know. He learned which juice boxes they hated, which superhero was currently in fashion, and how to separate them when they fought over a toy. He learned to kneel down and truly listen, to put his phone away, to simply be there. In time, the boys grew accustomed to him. They laughed more. They spoke his name with a little more familiarity. Caleb began to ask questions. "Did you know Mom when she was young? Do you live in a really big house? Why don't you have any kids?" Dorian answered honestly, carefully. One afternoon, as they walked back to Clara's flat, Finn took his hand without being asked. Caleb did the same, then looked up and asked, "Why do you always smile when you talk to us?" Dorian looked down at them both, their cheeks flushed from running, their matching backpacks bouncing. "Because I'm lucky," he said simply. "I get to be here with you." Clara waited at the door, arms crossed. She always watched him closely after every visit, as if measuring whether he had earned another. But this time, something shifted. She saw the boys rush inside, laughing, telling her about the swings. And then she looked at him. "You didn't leave today," she said softly. "You stayed even when Finn was scared. You stayed even when Caleb went quiet." Dorian nodded. "I told them I would." Clara looked down, then back up at him. "Keep doing that, just like that." Without grand gestures or emotional speeches, the wall between them lowered. It wasn't gone, but it had thinned. And Dorian knew this wasn't about being forgiven in one moment. It was about showing up in hundreds of them. And he would. Always. The name, Part 4. Dorian hadn't expected the word to come so soon. Nearly 3 months had passed since he started seeing Caleb and Finn regularly. He never missed a visit. He was never late. He had accepted that. For now, he was just Dorian, the man who brought good snacks, played tag without checking his phone, and laughed at their jokes. But one Saturday afternoon, something changed. Clara had an interview for a new design contract and asked Dorian to look after the boys for a few hours at his Dublin apartment, which he had quickly adapted with woven toy baskets, a small craft table, and a fridge full of juice boxes, and the kind of sugary cereal he definitely did not approve of, but bought because they loved it. They built an elaborate pillow fort between the sofas. Caleb declared himself captain. Finn insisted on being the science officer. Dorian played along as Commander Dad, a name Finn invented mid-game and said without thinking. Dorian froze for a second, startled by the word Dad. He didn't respond immediately, afraid that if he reacted too strongly, Finn would take it back. So he just smiled and kept playing. But inside, he was a whirlwind. The word kept echoing in his mind. He hadn't earned it yet. Or maybe he had, little by little. Not through grand gestures, but through consistency, time, and quiet love. Later that evening, after dinner, and lying under the still-standing pillow, Fort watching a cartoon, Finn snuggled up next to him and looked up. "Can I call you Dad now, or do I have to wait?" Dorian felt his throat tighten. He looked at Finn's small, serious face, then at Caleb, who was also watching. clutching his favorite plush dinosaur. Dorian reached out and hugged them both. "You can call me whatever feels right," he said, his voice husky. "But if you want to call me Dad, I would be very proud of that." Finn nodded. Caleb gave him a small smile, the kind that says more than words. That night, Clara came to collect them. She found them asleep on the sofa, Finn resting on Dorian's chest. Caleb nestled beside him, both snoring softly. Dorian had fallen asleep too, his arm protectively around both, the TV still on low volume in the background. She didn't wake them immediately. She stood there for a long moment, just watching. Something deep inside her, something that had been locked away, began to move. She saw how safely Dorian held them in their sleep. When she finally woke him, Dorian slowly stirred. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "We must have all fallen asleep." Clara shook her head. They were happy. That's what matters. As she gently roused the boys, Dorian watched. "Finn called me Dad today," he said quietly. He asked if it was okay. Clara didn't speak immediately. Then she looked at him and said, "He wouldn't have asked if he didn't already feel it." The drive home was quiet. Dorian rode in the back seat with the children, holding their hands as they slept. Clara watched in the rearview mirror, and something inside her settled for the first time in a long time. The walls she had built to protect herself began to fall. Not all at once, but piece by piece. The final confrontation. Part 5. Dorian hadn't planned to confront his parents. He had avoided it for months, concentrating instead on showing up for Caleb and Finn, on earning Clara's cautious trust, on building something genuine from the pieces of the life he had once destroyed. But the silence stopped feeling like strength and started feeling like surrender. The more he embraced fatherhood, the more unbearable it became to know that his parents had stolen this from him. He needed to face them, not for closure, but for clarity. He arrived at the St. Clair estate in London on a crisp Sunday morning. Lord Julian received him in the library, sitting in the same leather chair where so many past conversations had been framed as sermons. Lady Helena appeared moments later, immaculate as always. "I'm surprised you came," his father said, crossing his hands. "We didn't think we would hear from you again." Dorian didn't sit. He stood near the fireplace, his posture quiet but unyielding. "We need to talk. About Clara. About the children." Lady Helena stiffened at the mention of her. "We warned you about her years ago." Dorian turned to her, his voice sharp but controlled. "You didn't warn me. You lied to me. You blocked letters. You ignored calls. You told people to keep her away from me." His father's eyes narrowed. "We did what was necessary to protect your future. You were emotional, unfocused. You would have thrown away your entire legacy for a girl who had nothing." Dorian took a deep breath, fury rising in his chest. "That girl is the mother of my children. Children you never even bothered to know existed. She raised them alone, with nothing. And they turned out better than anything this family has ever produced." Lady Helena stood up, her voice cutting. "Don't be dramatic. Do you think we haven't sacrificed for you? For this name? For your success?" "My success," Dorian interrupted. "It has nothing to do with this name anymore. The company, the image, the money. None of it matters if it costs me humanity. You tried to make me choose between love and legacy, and I listened. I walked away from the only real thing I had, but I will not make that mistake again." There was a heavy silence. His father leaned back, his tone suddenly colder, more strategic. "And now what? You'll play house with a woman and pretend you're a family man? Do you think the world will swallow that?" Dorian looked at him, disgusted. "I don't care what the world swallows. I care what Caleb and Finn see when they look at me. I care what kind of man I am when I tuck them into bed. And I care about the woman who carried that burden when I left. I am not here for your blessing," he finished. I am here to tell you your control ends now. If you cannot accept my family, you will not be a part of our lives. That is your choice. But I am done living under your version of success." They didn't respond immediately. There was a visible fracture in the illusion of power they had always held over him. For the first time, Dorian wasn't the boy seeking approval. He was the man drawing the line. "I pity you," he added softly. "You will never know them. You will never hear Caleb explain how he thinks the moon controls feelings, or see the way Finn draws his dreams. You will miss everything, and one day you will realize you traded your grandchildren for control." He turned and walked out, leaving them in their perfect, empty house. When he returned to his apartment, Clara and the boys were waiting. She looked up when he entered, reading his face instantly. "Did you tell them?" she asked. He nodded. "Everything." "And?" "They didn't take it well." Clara stepped closer. "Do you regret it?" Dorian looked at his sons, who were building block towers on the floor, their laughter echoing through the room. "Not for a second," he said. The Silent Power, Epilogue. The following night, after the boys were asleep, Clara handed Dorian a small, plain box. Inside was a photograph, one she had taken weeks earlier when he wasn't looking. He was sitting on the grass at the park, Finn in his lap. Caleb nestled beside him, all three laughing uproariously. She had printed and framed it, a silent gesture, a thank you, a beginning. Dorian held the photo for a long time before placing it on the shelf next to the children's art projects. He no longer needed validation from anyone but them, his family, his future. The life he chose, finally, on his own terms. A year passed. Dorian's mornings began with spilled cereal and the joyous chaos of getting 2 5-year-olds out the door. His nights ended with bedtime stories and small hands curled against his shirt. His London apartment had been transformed from a sleek bachelor pad to a warm, lived-in home where finger paintings covered the walls. Clara had softened too. She still had moments when the weight of their history made her pull back, but those moments were fewer now. They had rebuilt trust through shared responsibility and mutual care. One Saturday morning, as the boys played and Clara made coffee, Dorian stopped by the window with a small box in his hand. Inside was a delicate but strong ring. He walked into the kitchen and waited for her to look up. "What's wrong?" she asked, noticing the seriousness on his face. "Nothing," he said. "That's the point." He took her hand and led her to the living room. He knelt down, and for a moment, everything faded into silence. "I don't want to rewrite the past," he said. "I just want to write the rest of the story with you, as your partner, as the father of our sons, as the man who finally understands what it means to love fully and show up completely." Clara smiled, a wide, genuine smile, and nodded. "Yes," she said simply, "because I don't need perfection. I just need you." The wedding came a few months later. It wasn't extravagant. They held it in the small community garden Clara had helped design years ago. Caleb and Finn, wearing matching waistcoats, carried the rings, too excited to walk slowly. As Clara walked toward him, her steps firm, her eyes locked on his, Dorian couldn't stop smiling. There were no grand speeches, just short, honest, unpolished vows. Promises to choose each other, not just on the good days, but on the difficult ones too. When they kissed, it wasn't the kind of kiss that marked a beginning. It was the kind that sealed something already built, slowly, painfully, beautifully. Standing barefoot in the garden with the love of his life beside him, and his sons chasing butterflies, Dorian finally understood what true success meant. He was home. Completely. Finally. And this time, he wasn't going anywhere. The beautiful conclusion. What does this slow, deliberate process of earning forgiveness tell you about true love? Share your final, heartfelt thoughts and any lingering questions for Dorian or Clara in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories of redemption. Epilogue 2. The quiet threat and the unbreakable bond. Don't let the past sabotage the future. Hit subscribe and leave a comment. If Lord Julian tries to contact the twins, should Dorian and Clara let him? Share your advice. The unwavering rhythm. Life after the quiet wedding in the community garden didn't suddenly become a fairy tale. It settled into a rhythm far more valuable, a quiet, unwavering consistency. Dorian had fully embraced his new role. He moved his core operations from London to Dublin, delegating most corporate oversight to focus on innovation and, more importantly, school runs. St. Clair Industries continued to thrive, but its success was now a backdrop, not the main stage. Caleb and Finn, now 6, were inseparable forces of chaos and curiosity. They effortlessly switched between calling him Daddy when demanding a bedtime story and Dorian when trying to sound serious about a new Lego construction. Their bond with him was complete, built on thousands of small, present moments. Clara, now an equal partner in every sense, watched Dorian with a love that was mature, tested, and deeper than the initial burst of passion. She had reopened her small architectural firm, specializing in sustainable community projects, and her success was wholly her own. They were a team, no longer defined by the trauma of their past, but by the strength of their present choices. The echo of legacy 6 months after the wedding, an unexpected tremor reached their quiet life. It arrived in the form of a heavy, embossed envelope delivered to their Dublin address, bearing the official seal of the St. Clair family estate. Dorian opened it with a grim expression. Inside was a formal, chillingly impersonal letter from his father, Lord Julian St. Clair. Dorian, we acknowledge your decision to sever ties with the family and the firm's main board. However, it has been noted that the children, Caleb and Finn St. Clair, Lord Julian deliberately used his own surname, carry the St. Clair legacy. Regardless of your personal choices, the bloodline is paramount. We have established a substantial trust fund for their education and future. We expect to begin formal visitation arrangements immediately to ensure they are properly educated on their heritage. This is not a request, but an obligation to the name. Clara, reading the letter over his shoulder, felt the familiar cold knot of fear. Lord Julian wasn't trying to make peace. He was trying to reassert control through the one thing Dorian cared about: his sons. He is trying to buy their attention, Clara said, her voice low. Trying to introduce the legacy he forced you to choose over me. He's trying to remind me that I don't truly own my life, Dorian countered, crushing the letter in his fist. That my choices have consequences he can still manipulate. The unbreakable wall that evening, they sat the boys down. Not to discuss the letter, but to affirm their reality. Caleb, Finn, Dorian began, kneeling beside them as they ate their dinner. You two are the best part of my life, and your mom is the best part of both of yours. We chose to be a family, and we chose this life, this home, this city, this park down the road, because it makes us happy. Caleb, ever the rational one, looked up. Did the man from the very, very big house in London send you a boring letter, Daddy? Dorian smiled. Yes, he did. And he might try to contact you or your mom because he thinks he knows what's best. But only Mom and I know what's best for you. Do you understand? Finn, always the sensitive observer, leaned against Dorian's shoulder. We don't need a very, very big house. We have our pillow fort. Exactly, Clara said, her eyes shining with pride. We have the best fort in the world, and no one, no matter how big their house is, gets to decide who is in our fort. They decided together, as a unit. They would not accept the trust fund immediately, avoiding any legal entanglement, that would give Lord Julian leverage. They would respond firmly through a lawyer, stating that any communication with the children must be approved and facilitated exclusively through their parents. The conflict wasn't over. It was a lingering threat, a quiet, persistent attempt from the past to infiltrate their future. But Dorian and Clara were no longer the people they once were. Dorian no longer feared his father's disapproval. He feared losing the beautiful, genuine life he had fought for. And Clara no longer feared being alone. She feared letting anything taint the happiness of her sons. The legacy they were building was not the St. Clair name, but the unshakable foundation of their family, built on presence, honesty, and a mutual promise. They would face every quiet threat, every temptation of the past, as one. What do you think is the next move for Lord Julian? Will he use legal means, or try a subtle emotional manipulation on the children? Share your predictions in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe for the next chapter in their courageous journey. Epilogue 3. The Legal Storm and the Boys' Response. Will money and power break their bond? Leave your predictions in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe to see the St. Clairs fight for their freedom. The unwanted offer. Lord Julian St. Clair, a man accustomed to having his demands met with immediate compliance, was furious at the firm, but polite refusal from Clara and Dorian's lawyer. His immediate response was not to back down, but to escalate. True to his nature, he instructed his legal team to bypass the parents and file a motion with the Dublin courts, seeking grandparent visitation rights and officially naming Caleb and Finn in the public record as St. Clair heirs. The motion was a calculated act of aggression, a way to force Dorian back into the fold and put his private life under the relentless scrutiny of the elite London press. The news hit Dorian and Clara not through a formal document, but through a sensational headline in a major London tabloid that had somehow been tipped off. Billionaire tech CEO Dorian St. Clair's secret twin sons revealed in high-stakes custody battle over St. Clair fortune. Clara was devastated by the invasion of privacy. He wants to destroy the quiet life we built. He wants to destroy me by using you and the boys, Dorian replied grimly. But we are prepared. We chose our lawyer carefully. We fight this together. The Children's Council. They decided to tell Caleb and Finn about the legal battle gently, using the language of their world. Boys, Dorian began one evening, sitting with them in their beloved pillow fort. Remember the man with the very big house who sent the boring letter? Well, he wants to spend time with you, but he wants to do it on his terms, not ours. He thinks that because he has a big house and a famous last name, he gets to decide what's best. Caleb, ever the captain, frowned. But he doesn't know the rules of our fort. Exactly, Clara affirmed. And the rules of our family are that we decide together. Your grandfather is trying to use courts and lawyers to force his way in. We need to tell the court what you want. Finn, clutching his plush dinosaur, looked at Dorian. But you are our daddy. Why does he think he is? The simple question was a powerful truth. Dorian pulled him close. He thinks his money and his name make him a father. But you two taught me that love and presence are what make a father. He is my father, but I am your dad. We will tell the court that. The decision of the fort. The family's defense was built entirely around the boys' best interests and the strong, stable home Clara and Dorian had created. Their lawyer emphasized the children's emotional maturity and the potential trauma of forced visits into a cold, unfamiliar environment. But the most compelling evidence came from the boys themselves. During a supervised interview with a child psychologist appointed by the court, Caleb and Finn were asked about their family. Who is your dad? The psychologist. Dorian! They chorused instantly. What is the most important thing your family does together? Caleb thought for a moment. We build the fort. and Dad lets us be captain. Finn added, "We are safe in the fort, and nobody can come in unless we vote." When asked about the St. Clair estate, Caleb said, "It's too quiet, and they don't have good snacks." The psychologist's final report was unequivocal. The children's primary attachment was to their parents, Dorian and Clara. St. Clair. The proposed visitation would likely cause significant distress and interrupt a stable, loving environment. A quiet victory. Lord Julian's motion for visitation was ultimately dismissed. The court ruled that the parents were acting in the children's best interest by protecting their privacy and emotional stability, and there was no evidence of alienation. The victory was quiet, achieved not with a boardroom coup or a headline, but with the simple, undeniable evidence of two little boys who knew exactly who their daddy was. After the ruling, Dorian and Clara hugged their lawyer. Outside, Dorian looked at Clara, then at the sky. "We won, because of the fort." "We won because you showed up every single day, Dorian," Clara corrected, her hand finding his. "That is a legacy no fortune can ever buy." That night, they didn't celebrate with champagne or a fancy dinner. They celebrated in the living room, building the biggest, most elaborate fort yet, complete with a moat of blankets and a flag made from one of Dorian's old cashmere sweaters. As Dorian sat there, watching his sons laugh, he knew this was the only kind of empire he ever needed to build. What do you think Lord Julian will try next to reclaim his legacy? Will he finally accept defeat? Share your reactions to the boys' powerful testimony in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe for the final, heartwarming chapter of the St. Clair family saga. the ballast to the bomb. She came back as the CEO of his downfall attention. If you don't want to miss a single second of this story of betrayal, ruthless ascent, and cerebral revenge, I implore you to subscribe to our channel. Give us a solid like, and drop your comment right now with your first impressions on Amelia's masterstroke. The ballroom gleamed like a sea of diamonds and arrogance, and Ethan Blackwood was the king of his small, perfect world. His new wife, Veronica Cole, was a trophy on his arm, and his success felt inevitable. He chuckled thinking about the woman he'd left behind, his simple, unambitious ex-wife. He pictured her clipping coupons in a minuscule apartment. But suddenly, the music stopped. Severe, imposing security guards began carving a path through the crowd. Ethan felt annoyed, shoved aside like a nobody, until he saw who they were clearing the way for. The woman who stepped out of the Rolls-Royce wasn't just his ex-wife. She was a queen, and the crown she wore, he had unknowingly handed her 2 years ago. The Declaration. Arrogance in the Crystal Ballroom. The grand charity gala at the New York Public Library's Celeste Bartos Forum wasn't merely an event. It was a statement. It was a place where old money reluctantly mixed with new, and where men like Ethan Blackwood could measure their ascent. Tonight, Ethan felt he had finally arrived. He adjusted the silk lapels of his Tom Ford tuxedo, a smug smile on his lips. Beside him, his wife Veronica was a vision in a shimmering, backless Vera Wang gown that had cost more than his first year's salary. Her diamonds, a recent gift from him, caught the light from the massive chandeliers, scattering fractured rainbows across her skin. "Darling," Veronica purred, linking her arm through his. "Robert Jennings is waving at us. His firm just secured the new tech IPO." Ethan nodded, his gaze sweeping the room. "Of course, let's not keep him waiting." Ethan Blackwood was a man sculpted by ambition. He was senior vice president at a mid-tier private equity firm, a position he'd secured not only through ruthless networking, but also by marrying Veronica. Her father, Lawrence Cole, was a titan, a man whose name opened doors Ethan had once only peeked through. Tonight, Ethan wasn't just Ethan Blackwood. He was the son-in-law, the chosen one, the man who had successfully climbed. As they navigated the crowd, Ethan accepted compliments easily. He loved it. He loved the smell of expensive perfume, the clinking of champagne glasses, the quiet, desperate hum of networking. His new life was perfect. It was solid, expensive, and shiny. It was everything his old life was not. His old life. The thought surfaced like a bad taste. His old life had a name. Amelia. He allowed himself a brief, dismissive thought of his ex-wife, Amelia. Simple, quiet, brilliant in her own bookish way. The woman who had proofread his MBA thesis. The woman who had managed their tiny budget so he could afford the right suits for his interviews. The woman who, ultimately, just hadn't been enough. He'd told her 2 years ago in the beige living room of their rented apartment. "I'm moving on, Amy." He'd delivered the words with clinical cruelty. Us, it's just not ambitious enough. I need more. You're comfortable." "Comfortable?" she'd repeated. Her voice hollow. "You're happy with coupons and spreadsheets. I want this." He gestured vaguely toward the life he now possessed. He had left her, and thanks to a prenuptial agreement he'd insisted on when he got his first big bonus, she was left with very little. He'd heard through rumors that she was working some entry-level data entry job, living in a small studio in the Brooklyn Heights neighborhood. The thought provided a dark, satisfying punctuation mark to his own success. He was here. She was there. The natural order of things. "Ethan, darling, are you listening?" Veronica's voice brought him back. I said Robert is talking about the merger. Absolutely, sweetheart. He refocused his corporate smile, snapping back into place. He was bonding with Robert Jennings, laughing at a joke that wasn't funny, when the atmosphere in the room suddenly shifted. It wasn't a loud noise. It was a change in pressure. The murmur of conversation near the grand marble entrance quieted. Then, a line of men in impeccably tailored dark suits and clear earpieces strode into the room. They weren't venue security. They were private. They moved with silent, imposing efficiency, creating a wide, clear path from the door to the main dais. What on earth? Veronica muttered, annoyed. They're blocking the way to the bar. Ethan frowned. Certain prominent guests, including Veronica's father, were asked to step aside. Excuse me, sir. Ma'am, please clear the aisle. The tone was polite, but non-negotiable. Ethan felt a flicker of indignation. He and Veronica were also ushered aside by a man whose jaw looked carved from granite. Who the hell do they think they are? Ethan muttered, adjusting his tie. Must be a politician. Oh, how tedious, Veronica scoffed. The room was now bisected by this invisible wall of security. All eyes turned to the entrance. The string quartet, performing live music, faltered for a moment. A black Rolls-Royce Cullinan pulled up outside, its engine a whisper. A driver rushed to open the rear door. The first person to emerge was a man whose presence sucked the air from the room. Ethan recognized him instantly. Everyone did. Marcus Sterling, the reclusive, legendary tech billionaire. Sterling hadn't been seen at a public event in 5 years. He was the white whale of investors, a man who built and dismantled entire industries from his private island. A collective gasp swept the gala. Veronica's hand tightened on Ethan's arm. "Oh my God," she breathed. "It's him. Dad has been trying to get a meeting for a year." Ethan's heart hammered. This was an opportunity. If only he could utter one word. Marcus Sterling paused beside the open car door, but didn't move. He turned, an unusually soft expression on his face, and offered his hand to the passenger still inside. A black stiletto heel, simple and lethally elegant, stepped onto the pavement. Then, a leg disappearing into the sleek lines of a sapphire blue Armani dress. The dress was not ostentatious. It was structural, powerful, and utterly refined. The woman who emerged was not beautiful in the same way Veronica was beautiful. Veronica was a decoration. This woman was a statement. Her dark hair was pulled back into a severe, elegant bun, revealing simple diamond studs. Her makeup was minimal. Her posture was perfect, and her gaze was unwavering. She took Marcus Sterling's hand, and Ethan Blackwood's champagne flute slipped from his fingers, shattering on the marble floor. The sound was surprisingly loud in the sudden silence, but Ethan didn't notice. He couldn't breathe. Veronica, oblivious to, whispered, "Who is she? Is she his wife? I've never seen her. She's so plain." Ethan's voice was a dry croak. His perfect, shiny world had just cracked in half. "That," he whispered, his blood turning to ice, "is Amelia." Interactive moment and CTA. The impact was brutal. Could the plain Amelia be the key to this mystery? What secrets does this new woman hold? Share your theories in the comments. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to find out the shocking truth. Ballast and the Architect of Pain, 2 years ago. The smell of stale coffee and cheap toner. Amelia stared at the stack of overdue bills on her particle board desk, all addressed to her. Ethan, in his surgical extraction from their marriage, had been meticulous. The car was in his name. The condo was in his name. Joint accounts had been systematically drained to pay shared debts she didn't even know they had, mostly from his new, expensive lifestyle. He had left her with her personal savings, $428, and a pile of tax forms from the consulting work she had done to support him, for which she was now liable. She was 34, held a master's degree in financial mathematics, and was applying for data entry jobs that paid $18 an hour. The breakup itself had been a masterpiece of psychological cruelty. It hadn't been a fight. It had been a performance. Ethan had sat her down, not on their worn couch, but on a hard dining chair he had dragged into the center of the room, as if for an interrogation. "Amy, I'm going to be direct because I respect you," he'd begun, a lie so blatant it hurt more than the truth. This isn't working. She had braced herself. She'd seen it coming. The late nights, the smell of Veronica's Santal 33 perfume on his suits, the way he had started looking at her not with hatred, but with something worse. Pity. "You're not growing," he'd continued, pacing. "I'm on a rocket ship, Amelia. I'm headed for the stratosphere. And you? You're ballast. You're comfortable." That word again. Comfortable. It was the word he used for her old-fashioned loyalty, for her refusal to play corporate games, for her belief that their partnership was about more than his career. "I built your career, Ethan," she'd said, her voice shaking. "The algorithms you used in your pitch to KKR, they were mine. The financial model that got you your promotion, I wrote it on our honeymoon while you were scuba diving." He had the audacity to look hurt. "Don't be petty, Amelia. We were a team. But teams change. The league gets bigger. You just don't have the killer instinct. Veronica's father, Mr. Cole, sees my potential. He wants to cultivate it." "Veronica sees your potential, you mean?" Ethan had sighed, a sound of profound disappointment. "See, this is what I'm talking about. This smallness. You're thinking about cheating. I'm thinking about legacy." He told her he was moving out. He told her his lawyer would be in touch. He told her not to make it messy. "I'm giving you a clean break, Amy," he'd said, standing by the door, already looking like a stranger in his expensive suit. "It's a chance for you to, I don't know, find someone on your level. Go back to school. Whatever you people do." "You people." The door had closed. She hadn't cried. Not then. She sat in the hard chair for 3 hours, the silence of the beige apartment pressing on her. The life she had built with patience and love, the career she had sacrificed for his, had been packaged up and taken away like rented furniture. He hadn't just left her. He had erased her. For 6 months, she spiraled. Rejections from investment banks were polite, but firm. "While your academic background is impressive, Ms. Vance, a 2-year gap combined with your previous position in, well, nowhere, makes you a difficult fit for our fast-paced environment." She was too old to be an analyst, too green to be a VP. She was trapped in the professional purgatory he had designed for her. She finally took the data entry job. It was humiliating. Fluorescent lights buzzed. The stale coffee was free. She sat in a cubicle farm, and while keying in numbers, her brilliant mind screamed. One night, sipping cheap vodka from a coffee mug in her tiny Brooklyn studio, she was scrolling LinkedIn. She saw Ethan's ascent, a picture of him and Veronica smiling at a finance 30 under 30 event. His post was full of cliches, incredibly humbled, blessed. "Huge thanks to my team and my mentor, Lawrence Cole." Amelia stared at the screen. The fog of her depression, the gray numbness, suddenly burned away. It was replaced by something white-hot. It wasn't just anger. It was fuel. "Ballast," she whispered to the empty room. "I'll show you what ballast is." She turned off the television. She logged off LinkedIn. She opened the laptop she'd bought with her first data entry paycheck. She pulled a dusty textbook from a box, stochastic processes and financial futures. She wasn't applying for more jobs. She was going to create one. She remembered the algorithm she had written for Ethan, the one he had claimed as his own. It was good, but it was basic. It was a toy. In the 2 years since, she had ideas. Big ideas. Ideas about predictive modeling for high-frequency trading, about identifying systemic risk before it cascaded. She worked from 7 p.m. to 3 a.m. every night. Her data entry job paid her rent and her servers. She ate ramen and drank black coffee. She didn't date. She didn't see friends. She coded. She tested data. She built a model. After 3 months, it was functional. After 6, it was brilliant. It could analyze global market chatter, regulatory filings, and shadow banking systems to predict a market shock event with 94% accuracy 2 weeks before it happened. She called it Cassandra. She didn't send it to a bank. She didn't put it on her resume. She packaged her findings, a concise 20-page white paper showing how her model would have predicted the last 3 flash crashes, and sent it to one person. She sent it to the private, encrypted email of Marcus Sterling, the only man in the world who would understand, the only man who saw finance not as a game of golf, but as a war of information. She didn't expect a reply. She went to her cubicle the next day, her eyes burning, and keyed in her numbers. 2 days later, at 11:04 a.m. Her burner phone rang. It was an unlisted number. Ms. Vance? The voice was quiet, gravelly, and unmistakable. Marcus Sterling. Your math is elegant. My jet will land at Teterboro Airport in 90 minutes. Be there. The line clicked dead. Amelia stared at the buzzing fluorescent light above her desk. She logged off her terminal. She grabbed her cheap coat. She didn't say goodbye to her manager. She walked out of the building and never looked back. Teterboro tarmac was windy and gray. A Gulfstream G650 waited, its engines idling with a low, powerful hum. Amelia, clutching her laptop bag, was the only passenger. The flight attendant, who looked more like a senior diplomat, offered her champagne. Amelia asked for water and a notepaper. When she landed in this Caribbean, where Sterling kept his private innovation hub, a team was waiting for her. They weren't bankers. They were quants, data scientists, and 2 former NSA cryptographers. Marcus Sterling met her in a simple glass-walled office overlooking the ocean. He wore a linen shirt and shorts, looking more like a retired beach hippie than a man who could buy countries. Cassandra, he said, tapping her white paper on his desk. It's predictive. It's clean, but it's reactive. I don't want to predict the collapse, Ms. Vance. I want to be the one to cause it, or the one to prevent it. Can you do that? Amelia, running on 3 hours of sleep and pure adrenaline, didn't flinch. Yes, but I need access to real-time global trade clearing data, not the 24-hour delayed feeds. I need the raw feed from SWIFT, DTCC, and the major exchanges. Sterling smiled. It was a cold, appreciative smile. I have that. For the next 18 months, Amelia wasn't a person. She was a mind. She was forged. Sterling gave her unlimited resources. A black card budget and a team of 20 geniuses. He was a brutal, brilliant mentor. He tore apart her assumptions, pushed her to think bigger, and taught her the language of real power. Loyalty is a currency, Amelia, he told her one night over a game of chess. Don't spend it on bankrupt people. He taught her about leverage, about how the real money wasn't in stocks. It was in debt and logistics, in the structural weaknesses of over-leveraged firms. She learned. She absorbed. She rebuilt Cassandra from the ground up. It was no longer just a predictive model. It was an X-ray of the global economy. It could see the stress fractures in a company's foundation, the hidden debts, the executive dependencies, the political risks. It was a weapon. 6 months ago, she presented her first major finding to Sterling Global Ventures. We've been focused on acquiring tech. We're wrong. The real opportunity is in logistics and the mid-tier private equity that funds it. Specifically, firms with high exposure to European port regulations. She put a name on the screen. Monarch Capital. Monarch Capital, she explained. Looks robust. It's run by Lawrence Cole. It has a solid reputation, but Cassandra shows it's dangerously over-leveraged. 90% of its portfolio is tied up in shipping companies reliant on a single trade route, one that is about to become politically destabilized. Furthermore, its entire executive management is a nepotism trap. She clicked to the next slide, a picture of Ethan Blackwood smiling on a finance blog. This is Ethan Blackwood, the COO. He's also the founder's son-in-law. His risk management strategies are non-existent. He's been cooking the books, not illegally, but unethically, reshuffling assets to hide the core portfolio weakness. Monarch Capital is a house of cards. When this trade route is renegotiated in 3 months, they won't just stumble. They will implode. The board was silent. So we short them? A VP asked. No, Amelia said, her voice cutting across the room. Shorting is messy. It's a gamble. We acquire them, or more accurately, we acquire their debt. Right now, it's still rated A+. We buy it for pennies on the dollar through shell corporations. When they default, we don't just take their assets. We take the company. We take their board seats. We take everything. Marcus Sterling had watched her, his expression unreadable. When she finished, he simply said, "Executed." Amelia spent the next 3 months orchestrating the most complex, silent, hostile takeover in modern history. She bought Monarch Capital's debt from dozens of different holders, masking the purchases so Cole's alarms never went off. 2 weeks ago, the trade deal had collapsed, exactly as Cassandra predicted. Monarch Capital's portfolio went into freefall. Margin calls began. Yesterday, Lawrence Cole had woken up to find that his primary creditor, a mysterious holding company based in the Cayman Islands, was calling in his entire $9 billion debt. A debt he couldn't pay. The holding company, in turn, offered a total acquisition solution. That holding company was, of course, Sterling Global Ventures. The acquisition was finalized that very afternoon. Tonight's gala was coincidentally the perfect venue to announce it. The charity's board was full of Cole's allies. Sterling had insisted Amelia accompany him. "You built the weapon, Ms. Vance. You should be there to watch it fire." She had hesitated. "I don't know, Marcus. It seems petty?" he asked. "No, it's closure. You're not going as Marco's ex-wife. You're going as the new CEO of Sterling European Operations. The position is your reward for this." So she had agreed. She had put on the Armani dress Sterling's personal shopper had sent her. She had looked in the mirror. The woman looking back wasn't the comfortable Amelia. It was someone new. Someone forged. Someone who understood ballast. She had realized with a cold, clear certainty that ballast wasn't what kept the rocket tethered. It's what gave it stability before launch. Ethan had simply released it too soon. Final interactive moment and CTA. Amelia's ingenuity is lethal. Do you think this hostile acquisition is fair revenge or a calculated power move? How do you think Ethan will react when he sees his world collapse? Comment your expectations, and like and subscribe for the final blow. The Queen presents herself. Cutting silence. The moment Amelia stepped onto the marble floor of the ballroom, the silence that had fallen stretched, becoming thin and taut. It was a silence born of pure, unadulterated shock. Marcus Sterling, the kingmaker, had arrived, and he had brought an unknown queen with him. Amelia walked with a stillness Ethan had never seen. Her pace was measured. Her gaze wasn't nervously taking in the glamour. It was directed, focused, and completely, terrifyingly tranquil. She wasn't overwhelmed by the room. The room was overwhelmed by her. Ethan stood frozen, the broken pieces of his champagne glass at his feet. A waiter hurried to clean it up, but Ethan didn't notice. Amelia, he breathed. The name felt foreign in his mouth. Ethan, who is she? Veronica insisted, her voice now high with irritation. She tugged his arm. Do you know her? How do you know her? Is she one of your old assistants? The insult, which would once have amused Ethan, now made his stomach clench. Amelia and Marcus Sterling were moving. The security detail moved with them, a discreet, protective bubble. They weren't walking the perimeter, socializing, as Ethan had been. They were walking directly toward the dais, where the event organizers and the mayor of New York were waiting. The mayor, a man Ethan had been trying to get a picture with all night, rushed to greet them. He shook Sterling's hand, then turned to Amelia, his expression one of deep respect. Ms. Vance, the mayor said loudly enough for those nearby to hear. A pleasure. Your work on the new Urban Tech Fund is revolutionary. Mr. Mayor, Amelia's voice responded. It was the same voice, the same soft timbre, but the hesitation was gone. The upward inflection of uncertainty she'd always had was replaced by flat, declarative confidence. Thank you for having us. Marcus and I are eager to discuss the next phase. Ms. Vance, Marcus and I. Ethan felt a wave of dizzying vertigo. This wasn't possible. This was a nightmare. Maybe he'd eaten a bad oyster. Veronica, however, had processed the scene and arrived at a different, more cynical conclusion. Her painted lips curled into a sneer. Oh, I see, she hissed to Ethan, her voice dripping venom. Your little mouse of an ex-wife. She cleaned herself up, got a makeover, and hooked Marcus Sterling. My God, she's a gold digger. A gold digger. Ethan clung to the explanation. It was the only one that made sense. It was the only one that kept his world intact. Of course, Amelia, bitter and abandoned, had used her looks, what little she had, and played the damsel in distress, catching the biggest whale of all. She wasn't powerful. She was a parasite, but on a bigger scale. The relief was so profound he almost laughed. That's it, he muttered. She's with him. That's all. Pathetic, Veronica sneered. And he's so old, but still a billionaire. I guess even a 4 can become a 10 with that kind of money. Well, don't you dare speak to her. It's humiliating. But Ethan couldn't look away. He was obsessed. He needed to watch her. He needed to confirm his new theory. He needed to see her fawn over Sterling, to see the obsequious, dependent woman he had left. He watched her as she stood on the dais. She was talking to a senator and the CEO of J.P. Morgan. She wasn't fawning. She was informing them. The men were leaning in, listening. Sterling stood beside her, not as her protector, but as her partner. He nodded at something she said, an expression of genuine approval on his face. The world tilted again. I need a drink, Ethan muttered. He broke away from Veronica, heading toward the bar, his path intentionally taking him near the dais. He needed to get closer. He had to hear. As he neared a security guard, the same one with the granite jaw, the man placed a polite but firm hand on his chest. I'm sorry, sir. This area is reserved. I'm Ethan Blackwood, he said, his voice strained. I'm with Lawrence Cole. The guard's expression didn't change. This area is reserved, Mr. Blackwood. Ethan was a guest. He was a VP, and he was being blocked. He looked past the guard. Amelia was only 20 feet away. She turned her head slightly, her eyes sweeping the room. For one thrilling fraction of a second, their eyes met. Ethan saw no recognition, no pain, no anger, no longing. She didn't see Ethan, her ex-husband, the man who had destroyed her. She saw a man in a tuxedo, standing where he shouldn't be, being turned away by security. She held his gaze for half a second, and then she looked through him. She turned back to the senator and continued her conversation. That, more than the Rolls-Royce, more than Sterling, was the blow that shattered him. It wasn't that she hated him. It was that she didn't see him at all. He had been relegated from ballast to mere, irrelevant background noise. "Ethan!" Veronica was hissing from across the room. "What are you doing? You look like a stalker. Get over here." He stumbled back, his face burning with a shame so deep it tasted like acid. His perfect night, his perfect wife, his perfect life. It all felt like a cheap imitation, a child's drawing next to a masterpiece. He rejoined his wife, his smile now painful frozen mask. She looked right through me," he whispered, horrified. "Good," Veronica snapped. "She should be ashamed of showing up here. Now straighten your tie. My father's coming. He looks upset." Ethan looked up. Lawrence Cole was indeed striding toward them. But he wasn't upset. He was terrified. His face was pale, his hands were trembling, and he was staring wide-eyed at the woman on the dais. "Lawrence, what is it?" Ethan asked. "It's her," Lawrence Cole whispered, his voice cracking. "The one on the acquisition papers. The holding company. Vance. A. Vance. It's her." Ethan didn't understand. "What are you talking about? She's not with Sterling, Ethan." Lawrence choked, his hand gripping Ethan's shoulder so hard it hurt. "She is Sterling. She's the new CEO. She's the one who, God help us, she's the one who just bought my firm." The blood didn't just drain from Ethan's face, it evaporated. He felt faint. The sound of the string quartet suddenly muffled, as if he were underwater. "What? That's not possible," Ethan stammered. "Bought, Lawrence? We just posted our best quarter. The board was thrilled. I finalized the reports myself." "The reports were lies, Ethan," Lawrence hissed, his voice a poisonous whisper. He dragged Ethan and Veronica into a secluded alcove, his eyes wild. "You and your creative accounting. You redistributed the shipping portfolio debt. You didn't hide it. You just consolidated it. You made it a single, perfect target. I stabilized us. You made us easy to kill." Lawrence choked, looking about to vomit. "They didn't buy the company, you fool. They bought the debt, all of it. The margin call came from a single entity this morning. CG Ventures. I thought it was a competitor. It's a Sterling global shell company. And the signatory on the final execution was A. Vance." Veronica, for the first time, looked truly scared. Her flawless makeup couldn't hide the panic in her eyes. "Dad, what does this mean? What are you saying? Tell them to stop." "You don't tell Marcus Sterling to stop," Lawrence spat. "He doesn't buy you. He strips you bare. God, Amelia." Ethan's mind raced, trying to process the impossible. Amelia. His Amelia. The woman who alphabetized his spice rack. The woman who cried during commercials. She couldn't have orchestrated a multi-billion-dollar corporate raid. "It's a mistake," Ethan insisted, clutching at a burning straw. "It has to be a facade. Sterling is using her name. It's a cruel joke. He found her, learned she was my ex-wife, and he's using her to humiliate me." Lawrence Cole stared at him with dead, vacant eyes. "You really are that stupid, aren't you? He's not using her. He promoted her. Look at them." The three peered out from the alcove. The main presentation of the night was beginning. Marcus Sterling had stepped onto the stage to a thunderous ovation. "Thank you. Thank you," Sterling said, his voice quiet and powerful. "It's wonderful to be back in New York. I'm not usually one for parties, but tonight is a special occasion. Sterling Global has just completed a major acquisition, one that positions us to revolutionize the global shipping and logistics industry. It was a move orchestrated by a mind I can only describe as one of the most brilliant I have ever encountered." Ethan felt his entire butt seize up. "Ladies and gentlemen," Sterling continued, It is my profound privilege to introduce you to the future of my company. The new CEO of Sterling Global Ventures European Division, Ms. Amelia Vance. Amelia stepped to the microphone. The applause was deafening. She didn't smile, not at first. She just stood there, owning the silence. "Thank you, Marcus," Amelia said, her voice amplified and echoing through the grand hall. Her eyes swept the crowd, lingering for a chilling moment on the alcove where Ethan, Veronica, and Lawrence were hiding. 2 years ago, she continued, her voice even and clear, I was told I was ballast, something heavy to be discarded when the payload was ready for launch. Tonight, I'm here to demonstrate that the ballast was, in fact, the material that built the weapon. She paused, and the silence was total. Monarch Capital's assets will be restructured. Its operations will be managed by a team that prioritizes integrity over vanity. We will clean out the rot, and I'd like to announce that the executive team responsible for creating this unsustainable debt structure is, as of this moment, terminated. Ethan Blackwood swayed on his feet, feeling the air rush out of his lungs. He was fired. Publicly. Humiliated at the height of his pride. His perfect life, bought with cruelty and lies, was over. Amelia's eyes, cold and precise, found his in the shadows. This time, she didn't look through him. She looked at him. And in that look, he saw not hatred, but a final, complete, and utterly devastating closure. She offered a small, cool, victorious smile. She lifted her champagne flute, a fresh one, pristine, and raised it, not to the crowd, but directly to the alcove. A private, final toast. "Thank you," she finished, her voice ringing with finality. "Now, let's get back to the charity." The end. The ultimate CTA. That was the end of Ethan Blackwood's world. What do you think was the most satisfying part of Amelia's revenge? Was it the public firing, or the look she gave him? Comment below. And for more incredible stories of comeback and triumph, be sure to hit that like and subscribe button. The triple expansion, the aftermath, and the architecture of closure. Scene 1. The shattering glass. Ethan's immediate collapse. The last echoes of applause for Amelia's speech died down. But the air in the alcove where Ethan, Veronica, and Lawrence were hiding remained thick with the stench of ozone and disaster. Ethan was no longer swaying. He was rigid. The words, "as of this moment, terminated," were not just professional jargon. They were a death sentence to his carefully constructed identity. She can't do this," Veronica whispered, her voice cracking with terror, not anger. Her hand, clutching Ethan's sleeve, was slick with nervous sweat. "Daddy, tell them! Tell them it's illegal! You're Lawrence Cole!" Lawrence, however, was past fury. He was in a state of terminal shock. He leaned against the cold marble wall, his eyes fixated on the dais where his ex-son-in-law's ex-wife now stood, beside the legendary Marcus Sterling. "She already did it, Ronnie," Lawrence muttered, his voice hollow. "She didn't buy the firm. She bought the debt. She bought the right to fire us. Legally. Cleanly. That's why Sterling is here. It's a clean sweep. She is the CEO." Ethan finally moved, pushing away from the wall. His mind, the same mind that prided itself on ruthless calculation, was grasping for a lifeline. Wait. The reports. I filed the Q3 reports this morning. They were fine. The board signed off on the debt consolidation. I minimized the exposure to the port route. "You minimized nothing!" Lawrence roared in a sudden, desperate burst of energy, grabbing Ethan by the lapels. "You centralized it! You put all the risk in one basket to make the books look prettier for your bonus. You told the board we were diversified, but Amelia, Ms. Vance, she found the single trade route dependency and bought the whole thing through the back door. She didn't just fire you, Ethan. She used your own cleverness to execute the takeover. The realization hit Ethan with the force of a physical blow. His pride, the exact, smug certainty that had allowed him to dismiss Amelia as ballast, was his undoing. He hadn't just been fired. He had been outsmarted by the quiet woman he left crying on a dining chair. He saw the security guard with the granite jaw approaching the alcove. This time, the guard didn't even speak. He simply pointed toward the side exit, his expression conveying utter contempt for the three figures huddled there. Veronica, realizing the public humiliation was about to escalate, tugged frantically at her father. "Dad, please, before they call the police, let's go." As they were ushered out through a staff corridor, away from the glittering hall, Ethan stole one last look back. He saw Amelia. She was laughing now, a genuine, relaxed laugh, as Marcus Sterling leaned in and whispered something in her ear. She looked light. She looked free. She looked exactly like the woman he had stopped her from becoming. His Rolls-Royce Cullinan, the very model that had brought Amelia here, was parked under the entrance awning. His own Mercedes-Benz S-Class, which he had driven with such pride, was already being towed away from the VIP section. "My car," he mumbled. "They can't tow my car." "It's corporate property now, you idiot!" Veronica screamed, her flawless facade completely broken. "They fired you! They took your parking space! They took everything!" As they were forced into a taxi, speeding away from the opulent life he had just lost, Ethan looked at his wife. Veronica, in her ruined Vera Wang gown, was sobbing uncontrollably, blaming him loudly for her own impending financial distress. He realized the cold truth. Her love, their life, was just a transaction. A very expensive, now worthless, transaction. He finally understood Amelia's last look. It wasn't revenge. It was a surgical observation of an unstable asset being liquidated. Scene 2. The Architect and the Mentor. Justice versus vengeance. Meanwhile, back in the ballroom, Amelia had gracefully moved away from the microphone, accepting quiet congratulations. Marcus Sterling guided her to a private salon overlooking the main floor. The room was sparsely furnished but quiet, a calm eye in the storm they had just unleashed. "You handled the announcement with grace, Ms. Vance," Marcus said, pouring her a glass of water. "But the last look, the toast to the alcove, that was for you, wasn't it?" Amelia took a long sip, her composure unshakable. "That was for the Amelia who sat on the floor 2 years ago, thinking ballast was the most accurate description of her worth. And what about the Ethan Blackwood who is currently being driven away in a taxicab?" Amelia sighed, a small, tired sound. "I spent 18 months building Cassandra, and 3 months executing the takeover. All of it was necessary. All of it was logical. But when I saw his face, not the anger, but the shock of a man who realized he'd made a $9 billion error in judgment, I felt nothing." She walked to the window, looking down at the stream of cars leaving the event. "I thought I wanted to see him burn, Marcus. I thought I wanted the vengeance. But the only thing I felt was closure." Marcus leaned back, his expression thoughtful. "Justice and vengeance are two sides of the same trade. Justice reclaims the stolen asset. Vengeance consumes the thief. You chose to liquidate him cleanly. Why? Why the mercy of only firing him?" Amelia turned back, the sapphire blue of her dress catching the subtle light. "Because his cruelty was his own cage, Marcus. He defined himself by what he acquired. When he fired me, he stole my ambition and dignity. But he left me with something more valuable. 0 debt and a quiet mind. I was free to rebuild. If I destroy him now, I become defined by his ruin. My freedom ends where my vengeance begins." She tapped her chest. "My real victory wasn't the acquisition of Monarch capital. It was proving to myself that I could build something colossal, not out of bitterness, but out of pure competence. That is the antithesis of the transactional life he leads. That is the final nail in the coffin of his worldview, not his career. Marcus smiled, a rare, genuine expression of respect. Brilliantly reasoned, Amelia. The ultimate leverage is indifference to the outcome of the opponent. You didn't seek his destruction. You sought your own liberation. And the acquisition, Amelia added, a spark of dry humor in her eyes, was a necessary piece of logistics. Monarch Capital is structurally unsound, but the asset base is excellent. We will restructure and rename it. No more Monarch. We need a name that reflects integrity and mathematics. What did you have in mind? Amelia met his gaze. Equitas, she stated, using the Latin word for justice and equilibrium. Justice in balance. That's what we built. Scene 3. Equitas, the liberation. The next day, Amelia stood in her new office, the executive suite that had once been Lawrence Cole's. It was a vast space overlooking Central Park, but she barely noticed the view. The movers were removing the last of Cole's ostentatious furniture. She held the original copy of her Cassandra white paper. It was creased and slightly coffee-stained, a relic of her time in the buzzing cubicle farm. She remembered the exact moment Ethan's cruelty truly crystallized her resolve. It wasn't the initial breakup. It was 3 weeks later. She had called him, desperate for a few extra days before she had to move out, her voice breaking. Please, Ethan, just until the end of the month. I need time to find a sublet. His voice, cold and distant, had replied, Stop being sentimental ballast, Amelia. My lawyer said you need to vacate. I'm hosting a dinner for the Coles here on Friday. Don't make me send security to your apartment. Sentimental ballast. She carefully placed the white paper in a simple locked drawer, a reminder of the humble beginnings of Equitas. Her new personal assistant buzzed the line. Ms. Vance, a delivery for you. It's the Tom Ford tuxedo, sir. It seems to have been dry cleaned. Amelia raised an eyebrow. Send it up. A few minutes later, the dry cleaning bag was delivered. Inside was Ethan's pristine Tom Ford tuxedo, the one he wore that fateful night, with a small, neatly folded note tucked into the pocket. It was from Ethan, scribbled hastily on a cocktail napkin. I found this in the car. It was always yours. The suit, the firm, the ambition. I am sorry, Amelia. You are not ballast. You are the architect. Amelia looked at the tuxedo, a garment symbolic of the life she was supposed to covet. She didn't feel triumph, only a quiet finality. He had finally seen the truth, but it was far too late. She picked up her phone and dialed the property management for her former apartment building in Brooklyn. Hello? I would like to pay the next 6 months' rent for my old unit, apartment 4B. Yes, pay it anonymously. For the next tenant. Please send them a note saying, Welcome to your launch pad. The ballast has been jettisoned. Now, fly. She hung up, looked at the Tom Ford suit, and tossed it into the large, empty cardboard box marked for donation. Her revenge was complete. Her liberation was absolute. She wasn't just the CEO of a multi-billion-dollar firm. She was the CEO of her own destiny. 5 years passed since the seismic event at the gala, and the name Equitas Ventures, formerly Monarch Capital, became synonymous with integrity and disruptive success in global finance. Under Amelia's leadership, the firm became known for its mathematical ethics, only investing in companies whose balance sheets and social impact were demonstrably sound. The architect's ascent. Amelia Vance never looked back. She didn't need to. Her focus remained purely on building the Equitas legacy. She funded scholarships for women in quantitative finance, established research hubs for ethical AI in investment, and became the reluctant face of a new generation of power, one defined by intellect, not inheritance. Marcus Sterling officially retired 2 years after the takeover, leaving Amelia as the sole CEO of Sterling Global Ventures, an organization now run entirely on the principle of competence over comfort. In his farewell note, he wrote, "You have taught me, Amelia, that the quiet mind is the most valuable asset. The only true revenge is building something indestructible." The fate of the ballast. The collapse of the Cole family was swift and complete. Lawrence Cole lost the majority of his personal fortune liquidating Monarch's remaining liabilities and faced civil lawsuits from minority shareholders. He retreated to a small, isolated property in the Hamptons, his once feared name now only whispered as a cautionary tale of nepotism and poor management. Veronica Cole filed for divorce from Ethan 3 months after the gala. Stripped of her father's support and her entitlement, she attempted to leverage her social connections, only to find that status, once lost, rarely returns. She became a minor Instagram influencer, selling discount codes, a bleak parody of the expensive life she once commanded. And Ethan Blackwood? He spent a year unsuccessfully fighting his termination and desperately trying to salvage his career. Blackballed by Sterling Global's pervasive influence, he couldn't hold down a job above middle management. 5 years after being the king of the ballroom, Ethan was working as an analyst for a small, struggling logistics firm in New Jersey. One afternoon, he was reviewing his firm's quarterly regulatory filings and noticed a pattern of aggressive debt acquisition by a shell company. He recognized the mathematical signature. The debt was being acquired by Equitas Ventures. He wasn't being targeted for revenge. His current firm was simply an unstable asset, due for liquidation as part of Amelia's routine. Impersonal market clearing. He didn't fight it. He didn't call Amelia. He didn't even mention her name to his colleagues. He simply finalized the transfer documents with clinical efficiency. As he walked out of the office for the last time, Ethan looked at his reflection in the glass window. He saw a tired, middle-aged man who had gained everything by trading authenticity for ambition and lost it all in one night. He finally understood Amelia's last look and the quiet power of Equitas. He wasn't a villain in her story anymore. He wasn't even a plot device. He was just a numerical error that she had neatly corrected. That was his final, silent punishment. Utter, complete irrelevance.